Anyone who has played Warhammer knows the fear of being forgotten. Except for Space Marine players, y'all ain't never getting forgotten. Or at least your wallets aren't. But if you have collected any other Warhammer faction ever, and been around for longer than a season of Stranger Things, then you know this fear. You have experienced it. And if you don't believe me, you just need to cast your eyes across the faction lists of any mainline Warhammer game and see a boulevard of broken dreams. There are so many factions crying out for some level of support. New models, new ways of playing, sculpts younger than the career of My Chemical Romance. And sure, maybe they will get eventually updated with a price increase. But more likely, you're gonna get an update like Skaven got this year. A single monopose model thrown inside a big box set, but hey, you'll get that tactical rock. And this goes to the paradigm of how Games Workshop update their factions. They don't do it as and when they're required. Instead, they like to hold everything they have edging until the very last second, until the hype machine, until the marketing engine has been put into gear. And then they splurge everything out all at once, drenching everyone in a wild torrent of hype. Then the marketing machine moves on and it's like nothing ever happened. It's a pump and dump operation. Unless you're a Space Marine, in which case it's all pump, no dump. And maybe 10 years later, if you're lucky, you'll be handed some new sculpts and told, there you go, there's your bread. And Games Workshop do play favorites. If they were a parent, then child services would have taken them away long ago. They only really care about the models that sell well. They are a public company. It makes sense. I've spoken about this before. But what that means is that often many factions are left to languish. Yes, I collect Beastmen, Skaven, and Dark Eldar. Why do you ask? At least the Dark Eldar have nice models, I guess. Well, Games Workshop don't want you to know this, but there is an alternative to waiting 10 years for an update to your faction these days. If you're a Warhammer player and your faction isn't getting any love, well, maybe it's time you bite the bullet and check out an alternative creator like One Page Rules. And the reason I say this now is, firstly, because One Page Rules have sponsored this video and they have given me money in order to find space to talk about them on the channel. But secondly, because I was reviewing their latest releases this month, and it struck me that if I were a toy player right now or had any interest in the minor races in Warhammer, or races that were less popular, I would be salivating over One Page Rules. And here's why. In Warhammer 40k, I have always enjoyed the design of the Tau faction, but they have never quite been done justice in my eyes. One of the most interesting aspects of them is that they bring a number of auxiliary factions to the table. When you play Tau, you're not playing just the Tau, you're playing the Tau Empire that comprises of many different Xenos races. And the most important Xenos race within the Tau, except for the Tau, are the Kroot, a clan-based gene-eating species of cannibals who sort of resemble walking root vegetables. Seriously, look at it, they're turnips. They're just walking turnips. And the Kroot haven't received an update in a really long time. No, making a Kroot shaper a HQ option does not count. In contrast though, this month, One Page Rules have released a whole boatload of models for what they call the Jackal faction. And these are the Kroot equivalent, and let me tell you, these are the Kroot like you've never seen them before. Talk about glow up. Look at these gorgeous models. They are amazing. I love them. And of course, there is a link in the description of this video to all of the models that I'm showing off today. And to give you a little bit of history behind these guys, because it's sort of convoluted actually. These young lads started life as a minor faction of the Tau Coalition, the Tau equivalent faction within One Page Rules. And before you call the Tau Coalition a lazy name, just remember that the Tau are named after a letter in the alphabet. But the Jackals were originally created to simply add a splash of color to fulfill a function within the Tau Coalition. But these foxy little lads have evolved far beyond but a mere minor Xenos faction. In Grimdark Future, the sci-fi wargame from One Page Rules, the Jackals are a fully fledged and evocative faction. They have their own style, personality, and vibe. Oh, and army list, I guess. That's also important. And I genuinely love them. One Piece Rules has been throwing out bangers this year, and the Jackals are just another in this long list. And perhaps I'm a little biased. I, like many children, was raised by video games, but my favorite of which was Crash Bandicoot for the PlayStation 1, that little lovable marsupial. So maybe this is a totally spy situation, and I just really like these jackals as a result of my latent fetish. Crash Bandicoot! Kroot! But I gotta be honest, guys, these jackals, these little pups, they hit the exact right note for me. So yes, these started life as a Kroot, but you can see they've evolved way beyond that now. They're still carrion eaters, but they look great. And the lore behind them is fascinating too. The jackals were originally a group of primitive tribes that came across a crashed alien spaceship. And this led to an immediate uplifting of their technology levels. They had a technological revolution. Except that there was a big, massive caveat. They have reversed engineered the technology of other races. They just don't know how to make it themselves. So now they're galactic hitchhikers who trade scrap and scavenge to survive. It's a really interesting background. They're basically the Na'vi, except they decided to keep all the tanks and forget the trees. Pretty impressive for a 2-paragraph backstory, I think. And honestly, I think their design is a little bit more interesting, a little bit more universal than the design of the Kroot from Games Workshop, who mostly resemble angry turnips. Not that there is anything wrong with that. The jackals are a little bit more cartoony, I guess, a little bit more Pixar, but that's good, because they are brimming with personality and lots of lovely little touches. For example, I love the fact that their blades are all kind of slightly curved. It gives them a bit of a janky feel. And they have these little delicate knee pads too. Plus, they get the greatest weapon ever made, the junk sword. Bow to me, your queen of the trash. They look great on the table, and honestly, they capture an aesthetic that is really hard to get right, that of the nomadic wasteland wanderer. I love it. They feel very distinct as a faction in and of themselves, but you can see the design inspiration behind them. For example, you Vespid lovers, you lovable little perverts, don't worry, you can drop those ancient stingwings because look at these gorgeous vulture models. Wow, right? Between the gas masks, the shoulder pads, and the big awesome looking wings, these things are badass. Plus, they got dynamite strapped to their spears, and they really do feel like the vulture from Spider-Man, and I'm sort of here for that, like 100%. I love it. And the models paint up an absolute dream. And between you and me, I think that they would work really well in some mini-agnostic games like Stargrave. Hello, these are your space gnolls. And as I was reviewing the Jackal range for One Page Rules, it made me think of the Tau. How much better they're being treated in One Page Rules than in Warhammer 40k. See, the Tau recently had a codex update this year. Wait, this year? God, there's been far too many releases for Warhammer 40k. That feels like a much longer time ago. Jeez. But that Codex release was really disappointing for me. Rather than emphasize the fact that the Tau are a coalition of the willing, it was really their oppressive ranged shooting that was the defining feature of the latest Tau update. I was hoping that their new codex would make the Kroot and Vespid more important to the Tau army, so that you saw less mono Tau armies and more diverse ones. But the auxiliary forces got very little focus in that codex. In fact, all the Tau really got was an upgrade sprue for Kill Team, a new model, and a buff to an existing weapon. It was super disappointing. But if you compare that lukewarm offering to what the Tau are currently getting in One Page Rules, like, it is night and day. Firstly, the Tau have gotten a semi-new range in the guise of the Eternal Dynasty, a spin-off faction of the Tau. They started life as just a basic Tau proxy, but then they became so evocative and so interesting that they were spun off into their complete own thing. But many of the units here work as proxies for the Tau. And now this month, the minor auxiliary faction of the Jackals are getting an entire release, entire miniature range. They've been transformed into a coherent faction with their own unique gameplay. Like, how cool is that? And if you want to pick up these Jackals for yourself, then you can find the link in the description of this video for the One Piece Rules Patreon. I mean, admittedly, it does point to the fact that One Piece Rules is struggling to update the Tau, because every single time they look at them, just another new army pops up. But I am sure that there are many Kroot first players out there who salivate at the idea of getting this kind of attention and focus from a developer.
There are dozens of us.
But hey, at least you can play the Jackals in 40k as Kroot equivalents, because all of the Kroot units are represented in the army list of the Jackals. Or alternatively, you can take your existing Kroot models and use them in Grimdark Future. That's the beauty of one-page rule systems. They're not prescriptive. The game is designed from the ground up to be playable with Warhammer 40k stuff. It's excellent. It means that your existing collection is always relevant. And to be honest, it's a gateway into trying new miniature games outside of the Games Workshop ecosystem. So it's good then that the Jackals themselves actually occupy a really interesting gameplay niche within Grimdark Future. They are very dynamic. They have very little defense. Most of the units come with a 5+ armor save, and that means that they are very easy to kill. So you're gonna wanna stick around cover as much as possible, and you're gonna have to be really careful with them in how you position them. But they are fast and vicious fighters, and you really do get rewarded for getting the charge off on your opponent, especially with their huge beasts. And they bring a completely new gameplay dynamic to the table with their prowl and ambush abilities, and I think they slot in really well with an Eternal Dynasty army, personally. That's how I'm going to use them, as mercenaries for my Eternal Dynasty. And that points out just another little thing that I love about Grimdark Future. There are no overly complicated ally rules. You can take the Jackals alongside the Tau, or the Eternal Dynasty, or the Battle Sisters if you want. Because in general play, you can combine forces with no restrictions. No one's gonna come into your house and tell you, no, you're having fun wrong. No, it's up to you to develop your own theme. And then for competitive play, for competitive players, there is a limit. You can combine up to any 2 books, but it can be any 2. So it's really intuitive, really easy to work with. It's a game that meets the player halfway, and I really appreciate that. So this month is a pretty awesome month. I had a lot of fun printing out and painting up these Jackals. They paint up a dream, and I'm really glad the one-page rules occupies this space. And I love that they are going in really weird, really interesting design directions with a lot of their factions. I really like that. And you can use them as affordable proxies if you want for Warhammer, or you can play Grimdark Future. Honestly, Grimdark Future is so easy to get on the table that you may as well try it. I mean, if you want to play a playable version of Warhammer 40k and with alternating activations, like, it's totally worth giving it a go. And if you want to pick up these Jackals for yourself, then you can find the link in the description of this video. But of course, that's not all for this month. There is also a ton of really awesome Lizardman sculpts, especially the pterodactyls. They look really cool. Now, if you want to see my thoughts on these Lizardmen, these Saurian miniatures, then check out this video here. And a big thank you to Steven Jackson, Earthwormia, and Sonic Red for your support. I really appreciate it. And of course, a thank you to all my patrons and One Page Rules for sponsoring this video. And I'll catch you next time. Bye-bye!